20. First of all, we should know about the action potential of the ventricular cell. For example, the normal resting membrane potential of the the normal resting membrane potential of the ventricular cell is minus 90 millivolt. This was the resting membrane potential of the ventricular cell. Ventricular cell at the range of minus 90 millivolt. This minus 90 millivolt and the genetics of resting membrane potential of minus 90 millivolt is related to the leaky potassium channel. Now this patient have got minus 90 millivolt and this cell is stimulated by the sodium, for example. When the sodium is coming from the outside the cell into the inside the cell, this minus 90 may be neutralized to some extent. From this minus 90 first produce minus 80. From the minus 80 it produce, again sodium is coming and this minus 80 is neutralized and this minus 80 become minus 70. This minus 70 is very important in the case of the ventricular cell. This is also called the threshold potential. A threshold potential is a potential during production of this minus 75 millivolt, another channel, especially rapid voltage gated sodium channel are open. This was a minus 90 millivolt and this minus 90 millivolt is some sodium is coming and it become less negative and minus 80. Minus 80. Once still the sodium is coming from outside the cell to the inside the cell, this minus 90 first become minus 80, less negative, and minus 70. When it reach to the minus 70, which channel is opening? Rapid voltage gated sodium channel. And more sodium is coming from outside the cell into the inside the cell, and this minus 70 become minus 60. Minus 60 become minus 50, minus 40, and minus 30, minus 20, finally to 0 or above the 0. The cell is depolarized. The cell, what is the depolarization? Depolarization is defined as those conditions in which the cell is losing minus 90 millivolt at the cases of the non-pacemaker cells, and then the cell is gaining a positive electrical charge. Once depolarization occurs in non-pacemaker cell, in the pacemaker cell we have got 3 phases. One is 0, another is 3, and the last one was 4. But in the case of the ventricular myocardial cell, we have got 4 phases. This phase is called 0 phases, and this is called resting phase 4. Phase 4. This one, once the sodium rapid voltage gated channel is opening, this sodium lead to opening of the another channel, potassium channel. And this potassium channel is a slow channel. We have got 2 potassium channels. One is slow channel, another is fast channel. Under this situation, some potassium is going from inside the cell to the outside the cell. Concomitant with this sodium channel, we also have got calcium channel. This channel is called L-type calcium channel. And right now, the potassium is going from in to out. Instead of that, calcium is coming from out to in. The amount of the sodium which is going from inside the cell to the outside the cell equals to the amount of the calcium which is coming from the outside the cell into the inside the cell. This was the mechanism by which plateau phases of the action potential is produced. Because during this period there is no difference between outside the cell and inside the cell, so they produce plateau phase of the action potential. After the calcium channel, L-type calcium channel is closed. Which channel is? Rapid fire potassium channel, and more potassium is going from outside the cell into the inside the cell into the outside the cell, and the cell is coming back, and the cell is losing a positive charge, and the cell is coming back to a resting membrane potential of minus 90 millivolt. In the case of trigger activity, what will happen to this case? Remember a good example of the patient may develop infarctions, infarction or ischemia. During the infarction and ischemia, there is more, the cell membrane is destroyed, and more calcium is coming from outside the cell into the inside the cell. In addition, we have got sarcoplasmic reticulum or endoplasmic reticulum. This calcium stimulates this endoplasmic reticulum, and this endoplasmic reticulum also produces more calcium. In addition to that, there is a channel which is called the anidine channel. This is also loading some calcium from outside the cell into the inside the cell. So from 3, there are much more cation is accumulated within the inside the cells. When this cation or this calcium is accumulated more, this leads to fluctuation of the resting membrane potential. They fluctuate, lead to fluctuation of the resting membrane potential, and immediately this minus 90 once touch to this minus 70, and they produce abnormal action potential. If it occurs soon after the depolarization, this is called EAD, early after depolarization. In addition to this normal action potential, or in addition to the normal sinus or spontaneous action potential, beside of this action potential, we have got a pathological action potential. This pathological action potential is accidentally produced or unwantedly produced. When it occurs soon after the depolarization, it is called early rapid depolarization. If it occurs late, this is called LAD, late atrial depolarization. So this was the mechanism by which trigger activity is produced. How should clinically know about those ECG which is produced the abnormality according to this triggered activity, especially premature ventricular beat or premature beat is produced by this mechanism. Another, we'll repeat it again. The resting membrane potential of the ventricular cell is minus 90 millivolt. For example, there are some sodium is coming and this minus 90 millivolt become less negative. From minus 90 we will go to minus 80. Again the sodium is coming. When the sodium is coming, this minus 80 becomes 70. When it reaches the 70, rapid voltage gated sodium channel are opening and more sodium is coming from outside the cell, and this minus 60, minus 70 become minus 60. Again sodium is coming, minus 50, minus 40, minus 20, 0, and finally it becomes less negative. This condition is called depolarization. What is the depolarization? It's a process during which the cell is losing negative electrical charge and the cell is gaining positive electrical charge. This was about the depolarization. Once the depolarization is produced, this depolarization leads to opening of which channel? Sodium channel, a potassium channel. This potassium channel is a slow channel. And in addition to that, when some potassium is going from inside the outer cell, the calcium channel, some calcium is loading from outside the cell into the cell, and plateau phase of the action potential is produced. After the plateau phase of the action potential, which channel are opening? First potassium channel, and the first more potassium is going from inside the cell to the outside the cell, and the cell come back to a resting membrane potential of minus 90, and they prepare themselves for the accepting of new stimulation. Now in the case of trigger activity, what will happen during this production of the normal action potential? Under the abnormal situation, for example, I give you an example of ischemic heart disease, or for example infarction. If the infarction is produced, cell membrane is destroyed, more cation is coming from outside the cell into the inside the cell, especially calcium is coming more. This calcium leads to stimulation of the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and some calcium is released from sarcoplasmic reticulum, and there is another channel by name of the ryanidine channel. Much more calcium are accumulated here. When this calcium is accumulated here, this resting membrane potential produce fluctuation type, and some of them immediately touch to this 70 and produce abnormal action potential. When it occurs soon after the depolarization, this is called early, and if occur after the depolarization, this is called left or left atrial depolarization. This was the mechanism by which the trigger activity is produced. The most common cause of trigger activity in the clinic is VPC or premature beat. Premature. This was about the trigger activity. Right now we will discuss today about the circus movement. Circus movement. circus movement. Do you have some idea about the circus movement? And to get better idea about the case of circus movement or entry mechanism, first of all, we should cut several small cardiac muscles in the form of the circle. Did you understand? If to get better idea about that circus movement, we should cut some or several small strip from the ventricles. And this is the first circle. And this is called the 12 o'clock position. Or you suppose this is the SA node. And this is a node after 1.2 seconds, one impulse is produced. Right now we want to stimulate this area. This area. And before I say this is a normal experience or this is a normal condition. Under the normal condition, the part which stimulates the heart or this circle, it is constant. It means it is at the 12 o'clock position. This is SA node. This is the first, and this SA node produced after 1.2 seconds, one electrical impulse. And this pathway, especially in addition to these things, which is the SA node, another is the firing frequency after 1.2 seconds, and the place by which this circle, this strip is stimulated is constant. In addition to that, this, in this case, in this first experience, the SA node is constant. The SA node is constant. The second, the place of the SA node, is normal. Finally, the length of the pathway is normal. The normal conduction is normal. Velocity is normal. Velocity is normal. Under the normal situation, especially this is a circle and this is a cardiac strip, and we stimulate this strip at the position of the 12 o'clock. You suppose there is a SA node, and a SA node is produced after 1.2 seconds, one electrical impulse. Right now, this SA node stimulates this ring. Once they stimulate this ring, what will happen? There is electrical impulse is generated, and this electrical impulse start moving. You should check on this red one, This place, especially this constant place, is stimulated by the SA node. Or we stimulate, once this is stimulated, the electrical impulse moving in one condition, in one direction. The electrical impulse is generated here, and this electrical impulse goes through the normal conduction, normal pathway with normal velocity, and in one direction. When this gets finally it reaches to that point. When it reaches to that point, this electrical impulse dies out. Because SA node, before it reaches here, SA node is produced electrical impulse, and the electrical impulse enters here. So this originally stimulated area right now is still in refractory state. So under the normal situation, normal condition, this electrical impulse which comes here, this die out, and there is another electrical impulse is started. And again this electrical impulse coming again around this length and reach here. When it reach here, one moment or a moment before this electrical impulse to reach here, this area become depolarized. When this area was depolarized, what do they say for this condition? Refractory period. Refractory period. This area under the normal situation and normal condition out of the refractory period. This area becomes out of the this electrical impulse reach here, then this electrical impulse finds out that this originally stimulated area is stimulated, so when this electrical impulse comes here, it dies out. Remember, under the normal situation and normal condition, we have got constant this node, after 1.2 seconds, one electrical impulse, and the length of the pathway is normal, conduction is normal, normal velocity is normal. When the second accept is not accepted by this strip or this part of the myocardial part, which is completely depolarized. Did you understand? It was a little bit difficult. Yeah, it needs more practice.
Yes.
We'll say again. For example, this is the SA node. Huh? This SA node is produce an electrical impulse. Huh? This electrical impulse SA node produce after 1.2 seconds one electrical impulse. Right now, this is a strip muscle, or you think this is the cardiac muscle. Huh? Under the normal situation, the electrical impulse is produced, for example, from the SA node, and this electrical impulse enters two cycles. When it cycles, it goes in one direction. When it goes to one direction, finally it reaches here. This function of this electrical impulse is finished. When it reaches here, SA node, another electrical impulse is produced. So, and therefore, this electrical impulse does not enter to this area until it is in refractive period. So, we will see in the normal heart. SA node, AV node, left bundle, anterior fascicle, posterior fascicle. Under the normal situation, the electrical impulse is generated here. This electrical impulse comes through the intraarterial conduction to the AV node. After 0.4 seconds from AV node enters to the Hayes bundle. After the Hayes bundle, it enters to the bundle branch. Finally to anterior fascicle, and finally to Purkinje fiber. When this electrical impulse, which is generated here, this electrical impulse, when it reaches here, they finish their function and they lead to ventricular contraction. So the function of this electrical impulse is finished. After 0.2 seconds, another electrical impulse is produced. If this patient